Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Maoist-Third Worldist Collective. This podcast is a follow-up on the previous one I made about 2 hours ago, where I talked about a personal pledge that I made to stop eating out so much, spending literally what most people would regard as a small fortune on food, which I think is literally unforgivable. I honestly find it hard to forgive myself for having done that now that I realize it. Did I know it? Yeah, I knew it, I guess. But I guess I never really reflected on it or confronted it, at least not as much as I should have. And now that I have reflected on it, I'm forced to live with it and to live with the consequences of it, whatever those consequences might be. I don't know. I doubt there will be any consequences. I haven't broken the law. It's my money, I guess. I've spent my money legally, although in my opinion, I've spent my money frivolously and irresponsibly. So here's the reason why I am making this follow-up video. What occurred to me as I was chatting with my friend over the phone just before is that, in a sense, I feel as though I have become a rich snob. Now, am I snobbish? Meaning, do I look down on others? No. Do I see myself as superior in any way? No, not at all. Do I think that I am entitled to special social privileges? Absolutely not. In fact, I would be perfectly content if all of the privileges that I have as a member of the nouveau riche, which oddly enough is the same social class that Donald Trump is in, were taken away from me. I never thought I would see the day to be in the same social class as Donald Trump. Now, does that mean I have enough money, as much money as he does? No, I don't think so. Of course, no one really knows exactly how much money Trump has, but I'm sure he has a lot more money than I do. But I would fall into that same nouveau riche, lower upper class that Trump is. What is the lower upper class? What is the nouveau riche? Same thing. Literally, nouveau riche is French for the new rich. The French word for money is l'argent. And that word is not used in the context of referring to new money, but it's the same thing. I have accumulated all this money, literally without knowing it, because I did not check my portfolio. And so this money grew on its own, and I did not discover that I had this money until I moved down here to Texas. Interestingly enough, a good friend of mine says to me that she suspected I had this money all along because of my ability to spend so much money while I was working as a professor. which she also, as a professor, could not do. So maybe it's a lack of introspection. I'm not sure. But still, the thought plagues me. It literally plagues me. I am in the same social class as Donald Trump. What is the nouveau riche? Technically. Technically. Then we'll get back to that snobbish thing in a bit. My definition as a sociologist of the nouveau riche are people who made their money after World War I, meaning in the 20th century and later. So in the 20th century, beginning with World War I, 1914, and going now into the 21st century. That is the nouveau riche. The old money are people who made their money earlier. So there you have like the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, and folks like that. They are the people who established capitalism in the US. Now, who was wealthier? Surprisingly, the nouveau riche, the new money, are on average wealthier than old money. Maybe you can figure out why, but if not, I'll tell you anyway. The answer is really simple. I remember when John Walton, the founder of, Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, was the wealthiest man in the US. Obviously, he's dead now. His children remain in the top 20 wealthiest people in the United States. One of his sons, who was a pilot, died in an air crash, but his remaining kids are still very wealthy in the top 20. Not one of them is number one. Why? Because when a wealthy person dies, the money gets divided up. And that's what happened when Sam Walton died. That's generally what happens with old money, is that a person dies, it gets divided, and so each generation, the individuals in the new generation are not as wealthy as their parents were, because they only have a share of that money, not all of that money. That happens to the nouveau riche as well, but on a smaller scale, because we have not been wealthy as long. But generally speaking, because of that, new money or nouveau riche are wealthier than old money. So literally, I belong, sadly, I would say, really, really, and I am not exaggerating. I am not saying this for the purpose of looking impressive at all when I say sadly. I'm genuine, I'm sincere. Sadly, I am a member of the wealthiest social class in the US. Now, am I among the wealthiest members of that class? No. But I'm still in it. I'm still in it. Because the old money people are not as wealthy. Now, old money people generally have a stronger sense of class consciousness than new money people. Why? Because they've had money longer. They've had a much more extensive period of time to develop a sense of their own social class. They've developed interfamiliar relationships. They've intermarried with other old-moneyed families. They have their own clubs, country clubs, golfing clubs, yachting clubs, etc., meaning they have developed their own subculture. That is not the case, at least not to the same extent, with the nouveau riche. So the old money people have a much more well-founded social class with class consciousness. The nouveau riche, as nouveau riche, do not have a distinct nouveau riche class consciousness. Put it that way. Make it simple without adding other. I could add other things to it, but I won't, just to make it as simple as I can. Okay. That said, and I hope that was simple. I tried to make it simple. We sociologists think in very abstract terms many times, and we try to bring down our ideas so that the average person can understand them. That's called public sociology, communicating sociology to the general public. But it's not always easy. There's also public philosophy, public psychology, public anthropology, and so on. Collectively, we are called public intellectuals, and I consider myself to be a public sociologist and a public intellectual because I try to take sociology and make it comprehensible to the average person. I have regarded myself as that for many years. And I really do hope that I was successful in doing that in this case. Okay, now, getting back to my original point, snobbishness. Am I a rich snob? The only answer I can come up with is yes and no. Yes or no. And I'll tell you why, what I mean by that. I am not a rich snob in the sense that I don't view myself as superior, as I said. I have no sense of superiority at all. I really could care less in my consciousness, in my mind, about my money. But by the same token, I have that money and I use it. As I mentioned in my previous podcast, spending $100 or $200 a day is unheard of. Who does that? Wealthy people do that. And I'm a wealthy person, so I can afford to do that. So in that sense, maybe I'm a rich snob. Not in my attitudes, certainly not in my attitudes, but in my behavior, meaning how I act, how I regard my money, meaning rather than thinking about, gee, how can I take my money and benefit the fourth world or the third world, which I do think about too. But I've realized in the last few days, not primarily. Primarily, I think about me, Mark. Mark is the one I think about. And I'm not proud of that, which is why I made that personal pledge, not to you, but to me, that I would change, that I would stop eating out. So I feel as though I left this portion of my previous podcast out. And I began feeling that way as I was on the phone with one of my closest friends just before. It came to me in the course of my conversations with him sometimes my greatest reflections occur conversationally. Now, this particular friend of mine is dirt poor. He literally has no money at all. He lives in subsidized housing. He is disabled. So he is literally at the other end of the economic spectrum from myself. And yet he is literally my closest friend and has been since 1970. And he will always be my closest friend for as long as he lives or I live. I will always regard him as being my closest, my dearest, my most trusted friend. I would trust him with my life, and he would trust me with his life as well. That's the kind of relationship that we have. That's not snobbery. That's the opposite of snobbery. On that level, on the level of attitude, on the level of relationality, no, I'm not a snob on those levels. Where I am a snob is on the level of privilege. Not realizing the extent to which I am privileged as a multimillionaire and as a member of the nouveau riche, even though I have no access to that money directly. Well, I guess I could if I wanted to. Yeah, I could. It's there, but the money is paid to me as a salary. So literally, I make the same amount of money now as I made when I was a professor. There's no difference. In fact, you could even argue I'm making less because I have not adjusted for inflation since I've been retired. So in a way, I'm not making as much as I was making when I was working. So I'm not living the life that you would think somebody in the nouveau riche or multi-millionaire class would live, nouveau riche class would live. But I can't deny I'm nouveau riche. I can't deny that I am a multimillionaire, even though the money is not here. In fact, my condo has almost nothing in it except books. Books. Books and more books. Not worth hardly anything, I don't think, to anyone except for me. So that is my thought that I wanted to get across. And I felt bad that when I realized I had not adequately communicated that, in my opinion, in the previous video, I felt as though I needed to do that, to get that off my chest. I realized that at least for the time being, I don't have a very large audience. I wish I did. Not because I think that what I'm saying is so spectacular, but because as a professor, I'm used to speaking to a class, and I'm not speaking to a class. I'm only speaking to a few people. So it feels odd to me when I think about it, It's just not what I'm accustomed to. It's not because I think that my words have any special value. I have no idea if they do. Maybe they do to some people. I hope so. Genuinely, I hope that what I am saying benefits some people. Otherwise, why talk, right? Why talk unless I can potentially be of service to others? But again, I made this video in a sense as a follow-up, as a conclusion to what I felt was an incomplete previous video. And I hope that at least some of you if not learning a bit more about class, maybe learning a bit more about me, if you wanted to do that. Why you would, I have no idea. But it's always good to get to know somebody, right? Nothing wrong with getting to know each other. I really wish that other people would make follow-up response videos to my videos so I could watch them and get to know you too, but so far that hasn't happened. I hope it does happen in the future. For the time being, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Maoist-Third Worldist Collective. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.